Apologize to you all as our previous meeting ran slightly over and we just needed to do a transition here. Good evening and welcome to the November 29th, 2021 special meeting of the Board of Education. The time is now 5:36 p.m. We will begin with a roll call conducted by our board clerk, Mrs. Zuki Ellis.
Director Foster,
Here.
Director Broderick,
Here.
Director Allen,
Here.
Director Kopp,
Here.
Director Carrillo,
Here.
Director Ellis is here, Director Vu.
Here.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is live streamed. And next, I'd like to move to approve the order of the main agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. That's seconded by Director Ellis. Vote, please. Allen?
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick, Director Allen,
Yes.
Director Kopp,
Yes.
Director Carrillo,
Yes.
Director Ellis is yes, Director Vu.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with 7 votes. First on the agenda this evening is the 2021 calendar updates, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Gothard to lead us through this presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair Foster, members of the board. Tonight I bring before you information around a calendar update and a proposal that I would like your action on tonight. And I'm going to begin with the rationale. And this goes without saying, and I'll just read this aloud for those who are at home with us and here, but this change is being made in an effort to acknowledge the stress and challenges both families and staff are facing due to the pandemic. The district wants to give students, school staff, and their families a longer break. We also want to encourage everyone to use this time to get vaccinated or get your booster shot if you are eligible, which, by the way, now everyone is eligible for the booster shot. So even as I read this presentation, things continue to change in real time for this pandemic with the uncovering of a new variant that has been dominating the news. And though it's not here in the United States as of yet, but again, that could change anytime as well. I think we continue to find ways to support our staff, support our community, and all the proactive steps that we've put in place. I also think that I should mention at this time that we don't talk publicly each day about the challenges of the pandemic, and not only on all of our schools, but isolated to certain schools as well, just based on the rate of transmission in their buildings and some of the stresses that they might have. I want to share with you, board members, and with our community that on one of the busiest days, I don't know, last month, on a Friday, we had 300 absences in our district. Now, and that's licensed teacher absences. So, and those absences are for a range of things, from folks who've had medical appointments for months that have been booked that they certainly can't miss, those who might be out with a sick child who may be in our district or another district who may be in quarantine. I mean, all of these things just roll into, having a lot of added absences from staff and staff themselves, maybe not feeling well, staff who are working incredibly hard, who need that day. And that's within their contract and within their ability to act on that day. And 300 is a lot. On that particular day, our fill rate, so the percentage of those 300 positions that were filled, hovered in the low 40%. Okay, so that means that there are more than 150 staff who are not in their assigned place. And for many, not all, I don't want to overstate this, but for many, that means that there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 class periods in that building that the staff who are there are covering for on their prep time. It is a hard thing to do. I shared with our team that as a high school principal, I would always know what kind of day it was going to be because I'd come into my office and the big counter would be there and the yellow subfolders would be lined up on that counter. If there were 3, I felt great. If that countertop was lined up, I knew it was going to be a busy day. There was going to be a lot of different people in the building. There might be positions that aren't filled. It was a real challenge. That has become the everyday reality for many of our buildings, and on some days, almost all of our buildings. And it has been incredibly hard. Our staff is motivated and really there to support each other. We have released central office licensed staff to go in and help when they can. And it continues to be a real challenge. Executive Director McCarty and the Human Resources team are working with our third-party provider, Teachers on Call, to provide, again, some more regular, ongoing building-based coverage. But again, that time where you only need one sub in a building is gone because it isn't just one. Many times it's multiple, depending on the day of the week. So this has been real for us, and I really feel like our staff, that extra 2 days of break that I get to in a moment, is just one way that we can, support what's taking place in the building and give everybody that true breath that they need. So I wanted to bring up the Minnesota Department of Education key terms that are part of this proposal because they get confused a lot and many times used as one big one, a day off, whether it's a snow day, a digital learning day, e-learning day, or online learning. So these are all terms now that are very clearly defined in state statute. E-learning, you might have known that as an unscheduled day. So that would be weather forecast is for 8 inches of snow, and all of a sudden at 9 o'clock that changes and the wind changed and we end up getting 10 inches that's in the forecast, and we have to make that decision. We're trying to let our families know the night before, worst case scenario by 5 a.m. That next morning, that there will be no school. Now, the way that we would work with this, because of the approval that we've gotten from the board, is, when there is weather on the forecast, we're reminding everyone to make sure they take their device home so that instead of canceling school, we can schedule an e-learning day, an unscheduled day where there can still be lessons that take place online for our students. We have a memorandum of understanding with our staff. So though it's still new in many ways, there is guidance that's given for what is to take place on those days, those e-learning unscheduled days. You can see there's a limit of 5 per year. And this is very important for our community because I've been asked as recent as today, how come we just can't, take 2 weeks after break or give this time off? And we're not allowed to. I don't have the ability through state statute to just grant that. There was a lot of flexibility that was in place when the governor had emergency peacetime orders and was given the Minnesota Department of Education a great deal of flexibility that impacted local districts in implementing changes based on some of the things that we're seeing in the classrooms and in our communities. But that is no longer the case. The second one is digital learning days, and you know these as election day. You approved a change earlier this year that allowed us to not have students present on staff and students present on election day, and that was a scheduled digital learning day. And we've also done this with our K-8 schools and our 6-8 schools as needed as well. As you know, the district many times has different levels that are scheduled for conferences or for PD that aren't present, and we've used digital learning days. That way we can still accommodate our need for scheduled days and scheduled hours, minutes of instruction for our students, and there isn't a loss. So we can plan in that way with our calendar, and it's a really effective way for us to balance our calendars to make sure that our students all are ending the school year on the same date, same time, and things of that nature. I think 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe now, we had to add a few minutes here and there based on some snow days. So we've tried to really, as much as possible, much thanks to the calendar committee as well and other administrators, to try to get our calendar to be consistent pre-K through 12 to the extent possible. And then finally, online learning. You know that because we are a state-approved online full-time learning district. So we have an online school. So again, very different. Online school, meaning that a student is enrolled in that program. We can't just say, today we're going to go online. Nope, there's an enrollment process for that. Our online school has its own school identification number, and it is very much seen as a separate school within St. Paul Public Schools. The same as Obama and Maxfield have an identity, have a school number, the same with our online school, just to give an example. So those are the 3 different ways that we're using the key terms in terms of the action that I'm asking you to consider. The recommendation tonight before you is that we would exchange December 20th. Again, I should back way up. July 1st, had I thought we would be in this position as we near December, 5 months later, This is something that with foresight I would have said, let's make our break 2 full weeks. But we didn't. Things were much different in July, even into August and even September. And then, of course, we know where things are right now. And the incredible time and energy that this has put on our staff and our buildings. What I want our community to understand is that contact tracing is not as simple as saying we're doing it. It requires people. It requires coordination. It requires a precision that you can't just say, you know what, I'll do that later. I'll put that on a sticky note to remind myself. You can't do that. You have to get it done right away. And I've learned through Mary Langworthy, our Director of Health and Wellness, how she branches out as one person and works to support everyone. The contact tracing effort that we're doing, which very few schools are still doing, contact tracing, and especially to the level that we are, it's incredibly onerous. And I think that too is leading to some of the real concerning level of burnout, quite honestly, that I'm seeing right now. So we want to exchange December 20th, a student contact day, Monday of winter break, with the April 15th professional development day. That day was scheduled to be PD for all staff, and we will now move that day to December 20th. It'll be a PD day for staff, asynchronous and highly encouraged. It'll be a non-school day for all students. And then April 15th will become a digital learning day in accordance with state statute. Okay, so on the previous slide I shared with you how on election day you voted or you approved us having a digital learning day on election day. We would be asking you to do the same by this action tonight in making April 15th a day much like election day was for us. We'd also then declare December 21st a non-school day for all students and school staff as well. Slide 5 gives you just kind of a graphic representation of what we're asking to do. There's also some next steps. I have thought a lot about how can we sustain this kind of effort with some of the challenges that I've articulated to you tonight. And I think we've heard two ways. One, can we just take a break like some other districts are doing, and other districts are doing is around the country. As you all know, districts are all reacting to the impacts of the pandemic in different ways. Sometimes it's local politics, sometimes it's local laws, sometimes it's just the political weight in those particular communities, but each has responded differently based on their local environment and, of course, their state laws. And something I've thought about, can we break some of our weeks up with some distance learning days? And instead of just making that and bringing that to you as a unilateral recommendation, I'd like to collect some data because it's mixed, quite honestly, in our community. Certainly our families, many experienced real hardships with distance learning. That's real. We also know some students really did well. I know that some staff see distance learning as actually more work. To take this traditional way that I've been teaching, like to teach, want to be with my kids, and now I've got to try to force everything onto a screen. So it is not without some people feeling really against any proposal to increase the amount of distance learning. So knowing the board like I do, we are going to gather some data so that at least if we make some decisions and we want to consider some further days, let's base it on what we hear from our folks. So I've charged our team with putting together a short pulse survey to gather some information so that we can make some informed decisions. And I hope after break we'll have some information so I can begin to sort that through, allow you to share it with you so that you can view it, and we can see if that is something we would like to further explore as we move into the second semester. And I'm thinking mostly about some of those long spans of week after week where there is no break. And we would take a look at how we might break that up. I've seen a few other districts do that. Again, I don't want to say that I'm in favor of a day of the week, but we'll probably poll a couple different days just to see if there are any differences in opinions on that. So again, we'll seek feedback from our different bargaining groups as well, principals and SPFE, of course, to see if there are any considerations that they would like us to also explore. So with that, and obviously time for questions, discussion, but the motion will be to adopt this recommended change for the 21-22 school year to reflect the following: December 20th, 2021 will become a professional development day for school staff. Students do not report. December 21st will become a non-school day for all students and all school staff. April 15th, 2022 will become a digital learning day for all students, school staff to report. And again, I know I've thrown a lot at you, but April 15th would be very similar to election day and the approval that you all made earlier this school year, just to give you a frame of reference. So with that, Chair Foster, I will turn it back over to you and pause to see what kind of questions board members have tonight.
With that, I'll open up for questions and comments from board members. Director Allen?
Um, I like this plan. I just am wondering, is there any chance that on December 20th, we could organize food distribution? So those students that are without food for those couple days, or maybe even be able to do it for the week, because the actual holiday is until Saturday.
Thank you, Director Allen. I'm looking over at Chief Turner. We did talk about this a little bit and see what updates she can provide for us.
Through the chair, Director Allen, we did discuss the possibility of working with the parks to see if they could help us with partnerships. If the district staff were to provide the meals, keep in mind that there are school staff. So in order to be consistent and supportive of all school staff, having some time for what Dr. Gothard shared earlier for that support, rest, and relaxation, healing, and preparation, that would mean that that group of staff that provides the meals would not be able to experience that. So our first priority was to work with our outside partners to be able to provide that.
So all of our staff are going to do professional development on the 20th, or just typically it's the teachers union that does professional development, or the teachers EAs?
Go ahead.
Chair Foster, Director Allen, we will provide as much professional development as possible and make sure that it's easily accessed by all staff who would be affected on that day.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other board members, questions, comments? Vice Chair Vu?
Yes, I have questions about after-school activities such as Discovery Club. Will that still be in session, or if the facilities shut down, will that shut down as well?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, I'll start with one thing that we have a lot of activities going on over winter break in our schools. So with the 2 added days, they will be treated just like winter break. If there are competitions or rehearsals or different activities that are permitted, they will still take place during their time. As it relates to Discovery Club and some of that coverage, Chief Turner.
Thank you. Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, yes, Discovery Club on the 20th and 21st will operate as normal. Information will go out to parents after the board makes a vote this evening.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chief Turner. Just one more question for Superintendent Gothard. We're sort of heading into this phase where we have to manage people, manage our staff, right? Have you thought about how many days leadway that we give the public notice about announcing a digital learning day, for example?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, fair question. So one of them is set up to be this way. On the weather days, for example, I mean, that could be half a day. Hopefully we would have enough information where we would be sending reminders, take your device home in the event that we have an e-learning day. But making calendar changes like this, absolutely, I'd like to give as much time as possible. We talked as a team and we thought that 3 weeks would be enough. We will do whatever we can to support families, but we certainly did not want to push this until the next board meeting.
All right, thank you.
Other Director Kopp?
Thank you. I did want to acknowledge that with so many of the decisions we've been making, like some folks are going to greet this with celebration, and it's going to be a hardship for other families too, especially, childcare and whatnot. So just acknowledging that, and that we're always trying to balance those things, and that I think schools are a great place for those. If you're concerned about those things, checking in with your school community to see what kind of support can be provided if this is not necessarily welcome news.
Other questions, comments, board members?
I just have one more question.
Sure.
All staff will be paid for these 2 days, correct?
But through the chair, Director Allen, we have different contractual obligations that we'll have to kind of look at each one of those separately to make sure that we're obligated to those contracts and making any adjustments where we would have to. But the goal would be to obviously follow those contracts and see to it that staff are paid. Some of the PD shifting that around again, making sure that we use that as a work day. But there may be others who are going to have to change their duties on that day.
That's confusing. That just made me really confused. So due to contract, some people will have to still show up and change their duties. Some people have professional development.
On the 20th, on Monday the 20th, that's a PD day for our instructional staff. We will still have to have staff come into our buildings.
Right.
Some staff, very few, and treat it just like a day where we don't have school, and yet the building still might be open for permits and things of that nature. So there would still be work for staff in that regard. On the 21st, again, we would have to look for what are the different duties that have to be met in person on those days and make those appropriate calls on which staff have to report.
But we can't ask them to do food distribution. That's not, because it's not part of the contract, so we can't ask them to do that duty.
Through the chair, Director Allen, it's not so much with the food distribution, the type of food and the way that it's distributed, we're not prepared for that. It took us several weeks to be prepared to be able to deliver meals through the pandemic. And so the type of food that needs to be ordered, how it's stored and how it's packaged, we would not be able to have that done and meet the federal guidelines or even state guidelines of the food nutrition in order to have that ready by the 20th and 21st. So we would not be able to deliver food on those 2 days.
All right, that answers all of the questions then. But we're going to try hard to make sure that all staff are getting paid. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? While I was gone, I know the seats changed to names. I'm very impressed. No other questions or comments? Any closing questions for you, Dr. Gothard, on this? All right. Next, I would move to approve the 2021 calendar update as proposed. With the December 2021 becomes a professional development day for school staff. Students no report. December 21st, 2021 will become a non-school day for all students and school staff. April 15, 2022 will become a digital learning day for all students and school staff will move to report. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was seconded by Director Ellis. Vote, please.
Director Foster.
Yes.
Director Broderick.
Yes.
Director Allen.
Yes.
Director Kopp.
Yes.
Director Carrillo.
Yes.
Director Ellis is yes. Director Vu.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is the Envision SPPS, and I will actually turn this over to Vice Chair Vu to read a statement regarding the Envision SPPS and recommendations from the board.
All right, thank you, Chair Foster. So over the last 2 months, school board members have been listening to community members parents, teachers, students, and administrators about the Envision proposal to close or merge several St. Paul public schools. Throughout this time, the board has discussed Envision at length through many public meetings, as well as having conducted site visitations to impacted school buildings and have held many conversations among one another to come to a general consensus towards a modified proposal for which we will present today. At this time, LEAP, Highwood Hills, and Wellstone, along with its subsequent mergers, including Riverview, Cherokee Heights, J.J. Hill, Obama, will be removed from the proposal. This will leave Latoul du Nord, upper and lower campuses, Phelan, Jackson, Maxfield Parkway, John A. Johnson, Bruce Bento, Hamline, Gaultier, and Capitol Hill on the proposal. The purpose of tonight's special meeting is to discuss with administration the ramifications of this modified proposal. Before we begin, there are 2 points of context that the school board would like an administration to understand. First, for the schools that remain, the board would like to discuss how this modified version of the proposal will be supported. Secondly, for the schools that the board would like removed from the proposal, the board would like to discuss how best to continue to work with these schools and communities. Finally, the board would like the public to understand that for the schools that were removed from the proposal, there remain certain limitations and constraints that these schools and communities must work within. The school board intends to work with these communities and administration to identify these limitations and constraints in order to determine the best course of action going forward. The adjusted Wellstone recommendation. Wellstone Riverview merge will pause until October 2022, while the district works with the Riverview and Wellstone communities to discuss how to build the strongest possible Spanish dual language program. Because this pause impacts additional district programs, the following work is also paused: moving Riverview community to Cherokee Heights, moving Cherokee Heights Montessori program to J.J. Hill, and moving Obama students to new programs in anticipation of Obama Complex remodeled for J.J. Hill, Montessori, and future 6th through 8 program. What follows are specific directives to support important conversations in each of these communities during the following year in anticipation of future action. 1, district will hold monthly meetings beginning January 2022 to discuss the future Spanish DL program. Understanding that the district will be in the best position to support a high-quality, robust, desirable program if it is housed in one building. 2, Cherokee Heights will be supported to begin a West Side specific recruitment and engagement plan within their community. 3, during the next 12 to 18 months, Obama families will have the opportunity to learn about the Montessori model through in-person and virtual information sessions, as well as site visits to J.J. Hill. 4, a committee will be formed to begin to envision the future of the 6-8 program at Obama. And I'll open it up for questions and comments by board members. Is there any questions or comments by board members? Director Kopp?
I'm still sort of taking it in, but I did want to thank my colleagues and board leadership and Vice Chair Vu in particular for kind of helping us to organize our thinking around these recommendations and taking input from community and from one another, and for pulling this together. And we've heard a lot. We've had a lot of hours of meetings and conversations and presentations, and just appreciate the work to bring it to this point. And I might have some follow-up, but that's an initial reaction.
Dr. Allen?
Thank you. I just want to reiterate my expectation around in a future enrollment plan, because I don't want to not acknowledge the fact that the schools are in a crisis that we said that we're not adding to the proposal. Those schools are in a crisis. And we have to do something, and we have to do something now. And it needs to be like a real clear-cut plan so that community understands simultaneously, if we're not meeting the goals, what direction exactly we're going in those spaces. And so I just wanted to reiterate that publicly as my expectation for the administration and for our board to continue to stay on top of around these particular programs that are remaining open. Because we are in a crisis situation. We didn't just come together and make this decision to not close schools because we didn't want those schools to have well-rounded education. We do want those schools to have well-rounded education. It's going to take a plan, and it's going to take work, and it's going to take community and the folks that are inside of the buildings and our administration to really work hard to get us to that goal so that those buildings are receiving well-rounded education just like everyone else in the district.
Director Broderick, you have a question?
Um, Yes, just actually a question in terms of how we're going to conduct the rest of the meeting, because I am generally very much in support of this modified envision proposal. However, is the rest of this time that we're going to spend this evening going to be dedicated to talking with administration in terms of particularly the bullet points that are part of this proposal? Is that the thinking?
Yes, Director Broderick, that is the thinking, and if you have a direct question to administration, I think you can answer. You can ask them.
Well, my only remark would be that I approve of this modified invasion proposal, and I do have a couple individual particular questions about how it will play out, but I think those would probably come up during the discussion. At this point in time, I guess I'm thinking that unless I'm sure other board members may have something to say, but I think with you introducing this modified envision proposal, we've sort of put the ball back in the court of administration.
I have I guess a clarification question on the adjusted Wellstone recommendation. Pausing the merge until means that the merge will happen on October 20, will be approved on October 22, or is it essentially creating a new slate of schools at that point that would be part of that recommendation? Is that the idea, is that there would be a new set of recommendations coming in October 2022 for the board at that time to review and have presented, all the data that have been gathered over a year of work and then vote on those, correct?
Can I add to that, Director Carroll, so that I only have to answer this once? Because when I think about this, looking at this, that paragraph defining the board would like the public to understand that the schools that were removed from this proposal, there will remain certain limitations and constraints that these schools and communities must work within. And if we could be clear and clarify about that, I think about one of the last questions I asked, jumping back in and trying to get that information is, what are we subsidizing? Are we going to be subsidizing? I know one school is 1.3 million, another's this. What are those constraints? What will and won't we be doing for those schools really being able to do?
So I think I just want to say, respond to Director Creel. That's two separate questions. One, Director Creel, I think we need to revisit Wellstone. Just have a whole new conversation about that going forward. And the October 22 deadline isn't necessarily saying that we're just going to reset this motion all over again. It's just more of a time frame that when we get to this point, we need to come up with some options. And I just want to say, Chair Foster, that's a great question that I think you should pose to administration.
I just wanted to, add an additional comment on the plan. First of all, I wanted to thank all of the colleagues who have participated in, working together in conversations. And I want to also note that echo really Director Allen's comment about enrollment. None of these changes are done flippantly. We are very, very concerned about enrollment in our district. But the overall picture of enrollment is something that we want to address. And we would like to see that, you know, as a board, the districts talk about enrollment in a global sense, not just, you know, in a piecemeal way, and specifically addressing all schools who have lost enrollment over the past, you know, few years. I think we need to have a conversation that, you know, addresses not just pandemic losses, not just losses at specific schools, but our overall decline. And as we've talked about it, you know, the reasons, and really digging deep into what are the things that we can do as an organization to transform ourselves to become welcoming and offering an education that truly changes kids' lives.
I had a direct question to administration. Scale-wise, because we scale the proposal down, just how does this impact our courses of action going forward in terms of the timeline that we're trying to hit with school choice and operating some of the, making sure that the things on the proposal still move forward, but at the same time, now we have a different kind of work with the schools that aren't on the proposal. In what ways do we work that in and try to figure things out with these schools that are left out on the proposal?
Through the chair and vice chair Vu, Chief Turner, I'd like you to, excuse me, respond to the question. But first, I feel the need to address a couple of things. First, we have to be very careful and very clear when we're talking about enrollment here, that there are two ways that we can address enrollment. Well, there's many ways, but two ways from a holistic standpoint. One is we have 8,000 open seats in our district right now. So if we move 100 students from school A to school B grows by 100 students, school A reduces by 100 students, we still have 8,000 seats in the district. Okay, one could argue that we've succeeded at school B, but where does that leave school A? Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is I do not have the statement that was read. I don't have the bullet points. Envision SPPS was recommendations brought to the Board of Education from administration, and we've spent weeks now discussing it and hearing from you and many others about the strengths and weaknesses of those proposals for a vote that's scheduled for this Wednesday. If now the board is creating these recommendations for administration, I at least would like time for our administration to carefully analyze them. I am very concerned about saying yes or no to some of these recommendations or modifications tonight at the dais, having not seen them. I think it puts us in a really difficult position, and one where we've already taken our community through a very hard time these last 6 weeks or more. The last thing I want to do is make that any worse than it is for some of our community members right now. And I'd even like to just, I feel the need to say this, that delaying some of these decisions and telling communities that we'll come back to this in 2022, right there tells me that, that's some of our enrollment issues are going to be taken care of with that kind of direction. And I'm not saying direction from the board. I'm saying direction, and we're going to move forward and say, well, you might or you might not, and yet we still want to build enrollment. So we've got to be very clear with what we're asking for and what we're being charged to do. And I just feel the need to say that. But anything that is decided tonight, I would respectfully ask that administration has time to at least ingest what you're providing to us and just giving an analysis back to the board before you would make any recommendations. Chief Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Through the chair, I think Vice Chair Vu asked the question. I was going to really say something very similar to Dr. Gothard said, but just for a couple, I'll say it in a different way. that an example would be Obama, if we were to leave Obama open maybe for another year. I guess that's the first clarifying question from the board. Is will the recommendation be, or are you recommending to administration that the recommendation is Obama will close October of 22, or is the recommendation Obama remains open and we will continue the conversation? And then the same question for Riverview and Wellstone. Is Wellstone open and the conversation begins or is happening, or is Wellstone closing October 22 and we're just going to allow time for conversation?
I just want to respond to that. We're not going to close any, we're not going to do any new closures. So when these schools are removed, it's just going to be remained open until we figure out what to do further with the school. So, for example, Obama will not be closed in the fall of 22. That was never part of the consideration.
Thank you for that clarification. So knowing that, that's maybe what I anticipated, that is detrimental for all of those programs. And I think about it from a school choice perspective. And so let me tell you a little bit how this would happen. So Obama, Cherokee, Riverview, and Wellstone, there would be very few determinants that we would be able to tell a parent about those particular programs. So when we're not able to tell a parent a determinant about a program, I encourage student placement to encourage a family to pick a school that we do know determinants, because it sets a family up, a kindergarten family up, that they may have to make a pretty significant transition by second grade or by first grade or by third grade. So whenever a school is on the discussion for either moving, closing, or being modified, we tend not to highly promote that, because we're trying to be transparent and honest with families. And which is why we were so pressed upon the board to make a decision before school choice time. So we're asking thousands of families to come to the Excel Center in January to pick schools for fall of 22, so that when they go talk to a principal, they'll know exactly, for the most part, what their program will look like and consist. So if you were a parent coming to the table to talk about Obama, or to talk about Wellstone or Riverview, you would have to say, as an administrator, there are ongoing discussions. Riverview may be located on the west side, or it may be located somewhere else. Wellstone may be located in North End, or it may be located somewhere else. We're in discussions as a district to talk about how to build one strong dual immersion program. As a parent will likely say, no, thank you, I choose Adams. Because I know where Adams is, I know the address, I know the program, and so it has a negative impact on all the other programs. And I don't believe that was the intended consequence. That's just one example. It's also very, and others might want to speak about this, it's very difficult for staff to recruit staff. If a school is having an anticipated change for the future, it's very difficult to encourage teachers to go there. Principals differently, because we appoint principals, but there's very few instructional staff or that want to go to a building that's on the discussion up for changes and modifications of that significant. And I think Chief Collins wanted to add a couple of points to that.
Through the chair, thank you, Chief Turner. So, wanting just to probe a little bit deeper, appreciate the statement that you read, Vice Chair Vu. I'm wanting to kind of get just a better understanding from your perspective in regards to the reference to the limitations and constraints that the communities need to work within. And I say that in the vein of reflecting back on the presentation from Chief Schruel on the 15th of November that talked about a reduction of revenue of almost $20 million based upon a reduction of over 2,000 students. So what we know is that we're going to have some smaller schools, and our ability to sustain them, support them, subsidize them with that level of revenue reduction could be challenged. So I just wanted to probe a little bit deeper and get your and potential other board members' perspective on the limitations so we can be clear with families as we enter the choice season, or as people have demands of, in my experience as a principal, parents asking very directly, I'll send my child to this school if, and being able to provide those guarantees gets difficult through that through that school choice season, because in some cases the budget outlook and the actual reality of what the buildings will get is not set in stone quite yet.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that I don't have very specific details for each school. I just have an understanding that they're operating at a certain level right now, and that the expectations that they're going to like go up here, that's not a realistic expectations. That they'll still operate somewhere around here, very similar to what they're operating at right now, until there is another plan that comes in and changes that. That's just what I meant.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Boone and others, was there any discussion about BioSmart that wasn't mentioned? There was a adjusted Wellstone recommendation, but it primarily looked at the dual Spanish immersion. Was there a suggestion of what would happen with BioSmart?
Anybody want to respond? Director Kopp?
There isn't anything, I don't see anything specific in here, but I think as it would make sense if we're already having that conversation about Wellstone's future. I think it, I mean, I'll be honest, until we started talking about this, I didn't know Wellstone had a BioSmart program. And am I correct? Is it citywide busing as a magnet?
Yes.
Okay. And so I think exploring the viability of that is just, I mean, I think it would make sense if we're thinking about the future of part of the programming in the building. I don't know why we would exclude, and that's just a personal opinion. I think evaluating the program, I know that happened several years ago, where programs were kind of the magnet status was evaluated for kind of, you know, effectiveness, of uniqueness, and trying to understand that. And I think that would be important to know. Because the whole point here is that every school has a solid, robust, desirable program. Like, that's the goal. And so, you know, like what I'm interested in these recommendations are the things that get us to there everywhere. And like when Vice Chair Vu read this, it's like, you know, the general consensus, like there's parts of this I agree with and parts that I don't, you know, just frankly. The one thing I'm mindful of, having been a parent, and I promise in the new year I'll never say this again, but having been a parent in an unsustainable school, you know you're on those lists. I mean, I remember there was a collaboration between the district and SPFE several years ago, and there was a list of 8 schools. And there was an effort to go door knocking, and it was a kind of a big fanfare, and I don't know if it worked or didn't work, but like those schools are perennially on those lists. And so to your point about like families looking at, you know, there's schools that have been on that list for years, and I don't doubt for a minute that that affects their ability to attract. And so without a realignment of some kind, without some kind of real intense exploration of the quality of the programming we're offering at every building, then those schools are going to continue to kind of be in the back of people's minds. That's a hard thing to shake once you're a school on that list, because people don't want to take the chance. And I think when we talk about constraints, one constraint for families if we proceeded with kind of a timeline for some of these recommendations is that is a year of uncertainty. And that is difficult, and I wrestle with that balanced with kind of uncertainty in just forever. And so it's like that's a reason to kind of put a frame around it, simply to put some guardrails around what we're talking about, so it's not forever, and it's not that gut, not in your gut forever. There's an end, or at least there's a point at which recommendations or things are brought forward, and then we say, okay, now here's where we are now, and now what does this mean? And it's like, again, so many things we're doing now, nothing is easy or tidy. It's all intricate and difficult. But I am appreciative of this conversation as we gain some understanding about what it means if we proceed with these adjustments. I think as a board, we have to be 100% aware of what we are asking of our school communities, because for folks, again, who haven't done enrollment work, that falls to school communities. So when we talk about what's the enrollment plan, hi, I've done that. It's really hard. And people don't go to schools because they don't choose schools because Chief Turner says go to this school. They choose schools because their neighbor tells them to go to that school. And so the work that we are putting work onto our school communities that maybe have the least capacity in some ways to do that work. And so I want us to be just well aware of what we're asking our smaller schools who maybe are now dropped from this recommendation, what we're asking of them. Some schools will be fine, and some have a lot more work on their plate. And I think we all have to kind of factor that into our thinking and our understanding, so we are clear-eyed about what we're doing. We approach this from the legacy of other decisions that have been made by previous boards, and we will leave a legacy with this decision. I don't want us to be looking in 2, 3, 5 years and say, what did we do? We didn't know we were doing that. We've got to be more clear-eyed about it.
Board members, if I could respectfully ask us to go through just a quick process to frame this a little bit. We have to meet a legal obligation this week in order for you to vote on Wednesday night, if you are to vote on Wednesday night, and that is tomorrow night at a public hearing. We have to have noticed schools that are on a list for possible closure that you will vote on Wednesday night. And I want to be sure that we have an accurate list. So if I could ask Chief Turner, because I know you have them on your mind, if we could just go through each school and its status as it pertains to what we're going to be asking the public tomorrow night, so that we can at least get that list narrowed down, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Gothard. That is very helpful. And just for me to be able to help and the team to kind of help track, if we could go by area, that would be extremely helpful. So I, Vice Chair Brewer, Chair Foster, respectfully go the way you want to do it. I could call on Area A and you can tell me what you believe to be the case in Area A, or I could tell you what I believe the case based on this. What would you prefer?
All right, just to clarify, we are naming all the schools that remain on the list, right?
I'd actually like to clarify for each school what's going to happen.
Okay.
All right. Area A,
So
I'll start there, and then if you want to clarify if it's correct. Okay. Area A, administration's belief is that LNFI lower will merge with LNI upper at the upper campus
Yes, that's correct.
for fall of 22.
Yes.
Area A, Parkway will close effective this June, so June of 22 for effective of fall of 22. Parkway will close as a Montessori program and reopen in the fall of 22 as an upper campus for the Hmong dual and language program.
Yes, that's correct.
in area B as in boy, there are no changes. Highwood Hills will remain open.
Yes, that's correct.
And area C, Johnny Johnson will close and merge with Bruce Vinto at Bruce Vinto.
Yes, that's correct.
In area, oh, I'm sorry, for fall of, it will close in June of 22 and merge with Bruce Vinto in the fall of 22.
Yes, that's correct.
And then for area D, as in dog, Riverview Community, Riverview Dual will, and this is where I need some help, will remain open.
Yes, remain open.
And the Riverview community stays intact at the Riverview building.
Yes, that's correct.
So Riverview School will have both a dual immersion track and then a community school track. Cherokee will remain open as a Montessori school.
Yes, that's correct.
In area E, the recommendations is that Gautier will close and merge with Hamlin at Hamlin.
Yes, that's correct.
Gautier will close in June of 22 and reopen with Hamlin at Hamlin in the fall of 22.
That is correct, yes.
In area E, LEAP will remain open.
Yes, that's correct.
And also in area E, Wellstone BioSmart will remain open, and Wellstone Dual Spanish Immersion will remain open.
Yes, that is correct.
And in area F, like Frank, Obama will remain open.
Yes, that's correct.
And Jackson Dual, Dual will merge with Phelan at Phelan.
Yes, that's correct.
And Jackson Community will close and merge with Maxfield at Maxfield.
Yes, that's correct.
And then also in area F, Capitol Hill discontinuance of guaranteed pathway to Highland will end.
That is correct, yes.
I think that's all of the particular areas. A couple of clarifying points, which was initially included in the initial recommendation from administration, were suggestions on which buildings were going to be repurposed for early childhood centers. Did the board make any modified recommendations to those?
No, those remain.
Now, Chief Turner, if I could, and I may have to defer to General Counsel as well on this, but again, the purpose of tomorrow night's meeting is to have a public hearing of schools that are going to be closed. So if we are to talk about future uses for buildings, that doesn't necessarily have to be explicitly stated tomorrow night. for the hearing. It is only for the purpose of closure.
Director Foster, members of the board, Superintendent Gothard. Yes, the public hearing tomorrow is to give the opportunity to the public to provide testimony for and against the proposal with respect to closing schools. It is not about the second part of that equation, future use. It is just about the decision to close.
And members of the board, respectfully, again, I'm not saying that that isn't important discussion, isn't important for us to hear, but I just want to make sure that we are meeting the legal obligation for this week. So that's very helpful. Chief Turner, thank you for walking us through those that list.
May I ask a couple other further follow-up?
Yes.
What is the board's intent to do with the Obama building on Holly? The portion that was going to be repurposed for a middle school.
Could you restate that question, Chief Turner?
So, the proposal initially from the administration is that the west tower of the Obama building was going to be repurposed for the 6-8 middle school, but that was with the understanding that J.J. Hill was going to move to that particular building. And the board's recommendations are kind of silent on that issue. It says J.J. Hill will remain as is.
My understanding of the proposal is that ceases. That Obama remains as it is. Because that plan had to have the Cherokee Heights merge with J.J. Hill to sort of open up that space to be a K-8 Montessori program. Or not, it's not Montessori, but right.
So is it the board's intent that Obama Elementary School would be physically in the east tower of the Obama building, and that the west tower was going to create this new 6-8 program, and J.J. Hill then stays on Selby Avenue?
No, it was my understanding that with the merge of Cherokee Heights to J.J. Hill, that renovation be done in preparation to create that middle school program, right? But now that the merge isn't happening, the work on that west wing ceases at this point. Because that was part of the plan of the Cherokee Heights merging. If it's not merging anymore, then there isn't a need to do that. That was our understanding.
I think it's a clarifying question from Chief.
Through the chair, so Vice Chair Voos, if I'm hearing you correct, there wouldn't be any facility improvements because Obama would remain open, and then per what I heard you say at the very end of of what you shared with us tonight, that there's going to be a committee that's going to be informed just to talk about the future of 6-8 programs at Obama, but without any designation of it being particularly to Montessori or anything. I think what I heard you say is just a reference to 6-8 programs at the Obama site. Is that correct?
I apologize. Director Kopp, did you want to say more about the J.J. Hill?
Well, one question I would have about this is, would it be possible to proceed with kind of envisioning a middle school in that west tower without the Cherokee JJ merger? Is the intent to have a middle school in that part of the city, regardless if it's particularly attached to if not specifically a Montessori middle school, because we've talked about the challenges with that, but something that is maybe aligned or connected or related? Is it something we can do in 2 steps, I guess would be the question.
I just want to add to, because in previous conversations that we've had about the site, it's, you have the West Tower, and right now the West Tower isn't being fully utilized as part of the building usage, right? And what was proposed was that you remove JJ Hill there, and then we're going to create this new middle school. So technically, there isn't anything there because this was going to be a creation. It's not, we didn't just, it wasn't, it's going to be Montessori or it's going to be a middle school. It's just, well, perhaps this is where we put a middle school and it's not Montessori, but JJ Hill kids will feed into this middle school model. So we talked about, I think what was proposed was two different programs in this building with 2 different budgets. Am I misunderstanding that? Is that the way the way it's been presented?
Through the chair.
It's not Montessori, but it is you're saying there were 2 programs that are supposed to be created here.
Through the chair, Director Ellis, you are correct. But a couple points is important to note is that the West Tower was going to welcome all Montessori elementary feeders, not just JJ Hill. That recommendation was not, the Cherokee move to JJ Hill was not critical that it happened with JJ Hill, because if Cherokee is going to continue to be a Montessori school on the west side, when those children get to be 5th grade, moving on to 6th grade, they would be welcomed or encouraged to go to the West Tower with their other Montessori peers from JJ, from Crossroads, from the Nokomis North, and from Nokomis South.
But there wasn't specifically said this was going to be a middle school Montessori. That was not stated. So saying that you're going to take kids from Cherokee over after they finish 5th grade from Montessori to JJ Hill is confusing, or to Obama is confusing.
Chief Collins.
Through the chair. Thank you, Director Ellis. The move Cherokee to JJ Hill was about understanding the size of Cherokee as a building in terms of the number of sections, and to create, again, those economies of scale that we could provide to provide a larger Montessori at the JJ Hill site, create and implement some building level improvements, some capital improvements in the Obama site, and then have conversations about envisioning what a middle school Montessori, not middle school, I shouldn't say that, what a middle school 6A program would look like in the West Tower.
With primarily most of the children coming from Montessori schools. So you're correct, Director Ellis, it wasn't going to be a Montessori school. We're very explicit about that. But what we heard from our Montessori families is it doesn't necessarily have to be a Montessori certified school, although it is important for children to have that experience coming in when they all come together in one particular program. So that was going to be a recommendation, a citywide magnet program, primarily marketed to and welcomed by the Montessori feeder schools. Not exclusively, but primarily.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that this is, because before it seemed like we couldn't break it apart away from this bigger package. So what you're saying is that this could still happen even with this particular proposal.
Can you clarify?
So this Obama 6 through 8 program could still happen, even though with this proposal, the rest of the schools that were attached to that aren't necessarily going to close or change or move or merge. So the schools that were attached were Wellstone, Riverview, Cherokee Heights, JJ Hill, right? They're all going to stay in place, but the 6 through 8 program could possibly still happen because Cherokee Heights, Nokomis, JJ Hill, and Crossroads could all still feed into this program that would be welcoming to students who have had Montessori education.
That is true, through the Chair, that is true, Director Allen. Although there was going to be some synergy in the building to have a Montessori program on the east tower, and then have on the west tower a program that supports students coming from Montessori feeders. There was going to be some synergy, some leveraging of those similar like programs being together. Um, and in fact, you would lose that if Obama is still just a regular community school on the East Tower, and then have this other experience on the West. And
Is there any chance that this would increase enrollment if they had a K through 8 program in the building though?
Obama.
Yeah, if Obama had, would that be more appealing to parents to want to put their students in that particular program, knowing that they're going to be able to stay in the same building from K through 8?
Um, through the chair, no, I don't believe so. We surely have to look at the data around that. Although keep in mind that it's not sustainable with just Obama. Obama probably has less than 30 fifth graders, so we would not be able to sustain the middle school portion with only the Obama feeder to it. I will say without
No, I'm not saying just with the Obama feeder. Still create a welcoming space for all of those Montessori students. But I think I'm just wondering, would it be more appealing to parents? Would they enroll their students in kindergarten and keep them there through 8th grade, which would increase enrollment in the K through 5 area because they have a building that they could be in from K through 8?
it could potentially could be. I think Chief Collins, you wanted to add something.
Through the chair, Director Allen, thank you for the question. It could. I think the context of what we were thinking about as part of a comprehensive plan was looking at knowing that the opportunities that are going to be provided to our scholars at Obama with reduced enrollment and actually very small enrollment, less than the ideal piece, is going to be hard in terms of what I'm hearing you say is bringing them in at kindergarten and keeping them through grade 8 in that context. These would be two different schools in that context, and I think the original intent was saying, how do we create more economies of scale with Cherokee, combining with J.J. Hill, and then being located at that complex, and then engaging in what I heard the board share in regards to how do we think about a future 6-8 program at that site, understanding and looking at the data of knowing where our current students at those two buildings currently go to. So again, it's kind of maximizing space, creating as many opportunities as we can for students to keep them there. It's another transition in terms of that 6-8 piece. And so one of the pieces that, again, as I've heard anecdotal information, as I know you have as a community member and as a board member, in terms of trying to reduce the transition. So then going from being on site and having a larger number of students that could actually matriculate into a program in the West Tower is very different than choosing another middle school for 6-8 and then having to make another decision about what would happen in a 9-12 context.
Thank you.
One additional piece just to add to the Obama and J.J. Hill discussion is that the administration's recommendation was also that J.J. Hill was going to be repurposed as an early childhood. And so if J.J. Hill were to remain on the building at Selby, it doesn't allow for that to take place and happen. As we look at and recall the data around where children live for early childhood and pre-K, that area of the city does require some capacity for us to welcome pre-K in the next 3 to 5 years.
And that would be correct, Chief Turner. J.J. Hill will remain as it is.
Correct.
Yeah.
Was there a belief around with the board's recommendation about what we would do to where would we put pre-K students in that neighborhood as an early childhood center?
No, this is This is not a new recommendation. This is just our work based off the old recommendation, so we're not going to add anything new to this. So we basically just scaled down the proposal.
If I could add to that, that I understand, but we are in a very, I think, ideal situation for our community right now in that both the Build Back Better plan and St. Paul Ready for Kindergarten could truly fast track the opportunity for us to enroll children in St. Paul in 3 and 4K programs. And we're going to need your support, board members, to be very nimble in readying buildings for that and using space that we can. We're also going to have to send the message to our community that we're going to have to look for efficiencies in buildings for where children are. And it's hard for our staff. It's when we can develop capacity in one site, it makes a lot of sense. So we're going to need to be very flexible, and that message is going to have to be carried by all of us. That our goal is to make sure that we can put great programs, put our 3 and 4-year-olds in wonderful programs in our school district.
Chief Turner.
I think we need maybe general counsel's advice. And if I could be so bold and with all due respect, allow administration time for us to get together with the core team, provide some real data around the board's modified recommendation, because I would hate for the board to act on a recommendation and have unintended outcomes that you weren't anticipating to have, for the sake of actually just getting through an exercise. The decisions that this board was going to make are long lasting, have huge impacts for the entire community. And I think, to be fair to the community, as well as to the board, as well as to the administration, if we had some time to go through each of these and provide a impact of what that decision is, that modification. If this recommendation were to go through, then here's what would be the overall impact and change to it. I also think that the board should really know and understand, based on the upcoming projections, what situation you would be leaving a school like Obama, like Old Cherokee in. As I look at the potential projections based on our October enrollment count, that Dr. Greg Hill shared with us, some of these schools could potentially be reaching 100 students, if not less. And I don't think that that's the board's intent either, to have a school remain open with 104 or 110 students in them. So I think that would be my recommendation on General Counsel Long, how we actually go about doing that. And I think Chief Baker has a comment.
Through the chair, the only thing that in addition to what Chief Turner is saying, is really administrative feasibility. So we're just trying to ensure that we put out on the table so everybody understands. We've done it before in our recommendations. We want to make sure that you all have all the information that you need. It is not, I hope the public understands that it is not trying to sway votes at all. This is literally trying to ensure that we understand and we're clarifying what you want. And within us clarifying what you want, we provide analysis to provide you what we believe that we can do within the time frame that you've given us. The other thing is, I am somewhat concerned about, and I guess I wanted to make sure that the public understands this, that based on some of these recommendations, there may be some changes that happen to schools around budgets. And I don't want it to come across as we are maliciously going after a school in any type of way. It is just more of, in addition to what we plan to do in supporting our schools, there's some things that we will need to also do to ensure that we can balance the budget. And so we put that out there to the board to understand that you may hear some questions around schools that potentially have been left on the list. We will do as much as we possibly can to support these schools, but in doing so, there may be some changes um, to their budgets based on enrollment projections that we would need to account for. So I want to say that to the board, but also to the community of what we see and potentially what will be coming around the corner.
Thank you, Chief Baker. Superintendent Goddard.
Chief Turner, I'd like some clarity, because what you suggested, time, are you suggesting that we delay what we have planned for Tuesday or Wednesday of this week?
Thank you, through the chair, Dr. Gothard. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we not try to do this in real time, because I don't feel like we're giving you accurate information. We're going off of what we believe to be true, but I want to give you real facts and numbers and actual things. We have built the Envision FPS plan on data, and the administration's recommendation was made on data. I would like the board's modified recommendation to be based on data, so that you all can feel confident about the modified recommendation that you're making. That's what it is. So I think if we had, I guess all we have is 24 hours. 24 hours to get back together, and I don't know if we modify tomorrow's to be a presentation and a hearing, General Counsel. I'm not sure how that part works, but open for suggestions.
Chair Foster, do you have a question?
My question was, can that happen in 24 hours? And then what does that mean for us revisiting and having the time to do that?
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu, I wonder if we have the list for tomorrow night. We know that if we list that, it can't be anything. We can't add schools to it for Wednesday night. Wednesday night would provide us time to give a presentation based on what we've learned tonight that might have some of this analysis included in it.
Through the chair, Dr. Gothard, I think that would work. So you're suggesting we list all the schools in the modified recommendation, and then we actually go through the public hearing, and then on Wednesday we list those particular impacts.
All right, thank you. Chair Foster, question?
I had something I wanted to say, but I'm thinking about this, and I still think there's information based on this reconfiguration that we need to really understand. So I'm hopeful, because the goal here is really quality school configuration so that student outcomes and successes are working. Can you tell me when was the last time we had to look at closing schools? Does anybody have how long ago that was? I know I missed a lot and probably was asked, but
Chair Foster, was 2016.
so it's 2016, and how many schools did we need to close there?
I don't know the number right off the top of my head. Maybe some of my colleagues can help me.
4, 2, 4, 6.
It was less than 5.
Okay. And so that's the other question when I asked too, and thinking about that presentation for Wednesday, is I'm hearing 110 in a building. Again, what are schools going to get? What aren't they going to get? One of the things I haven't been around a lot, but I've been very public about the fact that we cannot continue to operate in status quo. It just can't happen. We as a board have to make some very critical decisions for our kids. To the community, this might seem like a mess to you all, but the point is to get the mess right the first time and take the time to do it. And so if I don't feel excited, like I'm hearing some misunderstandings tonight, and I need to be clear with the information given, clear with my colleagues about that. So,
Chair Foster, thank you for that. Maybe it would be helpful too, as the administration takes that time, if we could hear some of the rationale for some of the modified recommendations, then we could help provide some clarity around. That would be, I think it'd be helpful with our conversation. And an example, if we were to look at the Wellstone, Riverview, and kind of Cherokee piece, the modified recommendation says to keep Wellstone open, both BioSmart and Dual. Keep Riverview Dual open as well as Riverview Community. But then it says, it said to acknowledge the fact that the program really should be in one location. So that's not aligned. That's not. If the board's ideal is to understand that the programs benefit from being in one physical location, it's impossible then that all those buildings and programs would stay open. Or am I misunderstanding that piece? I believe you had read, Vice Chair Vu,
All right.
understanding that the district will be in the best position to support a high quality, robust, desirable program if it is housed in one building. So that gave me the administration understanding that by October of 22, our conversations are to get us to Riverview Dual and Wellstone Dual would be housed in one physical building. Was that not?
All right. Open up for board members. Does anybody want to respond?
Yeah, I think the thought is we want to respect the direction that the administration had set out, that they truly believe that housing the dual language programs in one location would be beneficial for the dual language program on a long-term basis. We also were very concerned with essentially getting one school who meet the criteria of well-rounded and crumbling it up to try to get it and put it in another, bottle it up and put it in another location. And we knew I've had experience of trying to do that and failing at getting the kids to move over. This is not a neighborhood school that is being moved to an adjacent neighborhood. This is a school that's getting its enrollment through multiple streams of people that are getting bused throughout the city to attend this school. Consecutively or subsequently, the whole set of recommendations that are connected to Wellstone and Riverview are linked to that. It's like essentially it's like a domino effect, and I can speak for myself and my opinion on this is that we have gotten to a point where all these had to happen because that initial decision was made. If that decision wasn't made, then none of them could have happened, and everything was a package. And we understood that to be a little bit problematic, and a little bit problematic that there was no plan B, much like we've discussed about, Montessori 6 to 8, Montessori adjacent, and similar programs. So I think in summary, the core issue is not the enrollment or the well-roundedness of the school that you're closing. The issue is the enrollment on the west side. And we think that if something needs to be done about the west side, business as usual is not the course to follow. What we need to do is we need to investigate how we can support Riverview and Cherokee Heights to become the dual language or the neighborhood school, which is really what's desired in the neighborhood, is a neighborhood school that has a feeder into middle and high programs. And um, yeah, I think that's the emphasis about it. Uh, the following conversations we had about what would a dual language program look like. We're opening the door for the district to continue to do its due diligence with the community in the dual language program and actually address what the community wants. And if we can get the community to agree that they want to be co-located at one site where that is how it happens, then by all means we acknowledge that, but we don't think it belongs to this envisioning program right now.
Any other board members want to comment? I just want to say for Wellstone, for me it was a matter of the ends don't justify the means. If what we're trying to do is create well-rounded schools, but then we're breaking apart of well-rounded schools, it just needs to be a different proposal, right? We can't squeeze this into this proposal that's the whole premise is well-rounded education. So what Director Creo says, we understood your vision of trying to align the Spanish dual language program to make it stronger, but just not within the context of what well-rounded is. It just doesn't fit. So that needs to happen by another means, another way. And what I suggest, encourage administration and even board members to do is continue to work with those communities to find out what way that is.
Thank you for that clarification. I would add that after this recommendation were to go through, dual Spanish would be the only language that is not in a unified building. We have the belief that we need a strong program for Chinese immersion, and it's all at Jiming. We have a belief that we need, in order to have a strong program immersion for Hmong, that we need both to combine, which is, we made that decision for Jackson and Phelan. So they're in one building. French immersion, in order to have a strong program, is now going to be in one physical building. And so our only dual immersion that would be Spanish. So that does send a very strong message to that community that your programs will look and feel differently. And that wasn't the intent of the administration's recommendation. It was certainly the intent to give honor and reference and respect to all of our languages, that we would, in order to provide a strong academic program that is aligned, it is in the best interest of the programs to physically be in one location, to be able to have that, again, that base of at least a 4-section base to grow up to. And so with this modified recommendation, we're not going to get there to have dual Spanish immersion in physically 2 different sites. Those programs will continue to, and I asked Dr. Obama maybe to add to this conversation, but those programs will not get to that point where they will be strong programs like our other immersion programs. Dr. Obama, are you able to maybe give a couple examples or join in?
Okay. Chair Foster, Superintendent Gotha, members of the board, I've had the privilege of actively being involved in the immersion program since I returned back to St. Paul Public School in 2011. First, as the Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Multilingual Learning, which includes the immersion programs, and the last 5 years as the Assistant Superintendent. So I know these programs very well. I understand. For years, we've tried everything possible to align our curriculum. We have been very successful to a larger extent with our monk program. Their curriculum are totally aligned. If a student were to leave Jackson today and go to Felland Lake, they would start at exactly the same spot and end at the same spot. But I'm sorry, I cannot say the same for our Spanish immersion program. We started the Mandarin program 5 years ago. Because of it's in one building, because of its intentionality and the alignment, it is rated the number 4 public school in the state of Minnesota, the most diverse of them. I will not be able to guarantee that for our Spanish immersion program. Their curriculum is not aligned. We've been struggling for more than 11 years to get them to do it. It has not happened. Now, to speak about Riverview, Riverview has been able to some extent, align its work with the community side and the Spanish immersion side. Because according to the principle, I cannot spend so much time aligning the Spanish immersion and leave the English community section unaligned. So whatever happens in the community section is what happens in the Spanish immersion section, based on the work that we've tried to do. When it comes to Wellstone, it's a different ball game. We have 2 separate programs with 2 separate philosophies. One of them was supposed to be a biosmart program. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we don't have that in place. So when we talk about a well-rounded education, if we have in a school 1 science teacher, 1 social studies teacher, that is to a larger extent not well-rounded education for some group of students. In this case, it is a biosmart program that are predominantly, again, African American students. We have 1 teacher who is juggling both programs side by side. She is so good, and she creates the illusion that we have a biosmart, which we truly do not have. We're not exposing the biosmart to the biosmart curriculum that we have promised. We have not been able to do that. We've tried everything we can to do that. We have not. Then when it comes to the Spanish immersion program, if you take a look at the research around dual language program, you cannot have 80% or 90% of the students be speaker of 1 language. Successful dual language program have had 50-50 model. We've struggled to do that. So I sit here today saying, please pardon me, forgive me, leaving things as they are does not allow us serve, in my opinion, 11 years opinion, our biosmart students very well and our Spanish immersion students very well, like we have been able to do with our monk program, with our Mandarin program that is very, very diverse, with our French immersion program that is going to merge in 1 building. If I could not do it in 11 years, with begging for money, applying for grants, we just could not, because they have different start time, they have different philosophies. I could go on and on and on. So when I was approached to give my input, I felt that in the last analysis, we're going to be doing as students a fair justice, fair, clear education that they have a right to. We can do this work in 1 building, just like we're going to continue to do with the Hmong immersion program, with the French immersion program, and with the Mandarin program. The way it is right now, 11 years, it's been a struggle, not just for the Spanish, but for the biosmart. It is not happening there. 1 science teacher does not automatically amount to well-rounded. 1 social studies teacher does not automatically amount to well-rounded education. Yes, we have them, but it's just piecemealing it because they're serving 2 masters at this time, the biosmart and the Spanish immersion program. So that is just as politically correct as I can be right now.
Thank you, Dr. Obama. I don't know if there's any follow-up questions.
Well, so I just want to hit on a couple of points, Dr. Obama. So you're saying that Wellstone isn't aligned, it hasn't been aligned in 11 years. And part of me is like, that doesn't require us closing a building. That requires us doing something different to get it to be what we want it to be. And to say that it's taken 11 years and it just isn't going to get there, I have a really hard time believing that that just is the case, right? I mean, to me, that requires a whole program evaluation. And how did we know that that happened? And what are we trying to align it to? It doesn't make sense to just say it's not doing what we want it to do, and so to close it is the best option. To me, that means that we reset and we're talking about what needs to happen for this program to be successful. That does, to me, is not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is let's not reset it, let's move it and hope that it resets on its own if it moves to another location. And that's not verbatim what you said at all. This is just me assessing what I heard. And I really, really struggle with that because this is the work of the district to educate students, for them to have good academic outcomes. And if we're saying we know something doesn't work and we've been trying to get it to work for 11 years, that's not on that school community. That's not on students. That's not on families for making that choice. That's on us for not changing it sooner. That is a thing we get to do as a school district. We do get to change things. And I'm sorry, but I just am like, I can't even believe like 11 years and this is the conversation we're having. If, as we've said and as we talked about, and it wasn't actually mentioned in the statement Director Vu read, or Vice Chair Vu read about BioSmart, again, we have not really specifically talked at great lengths about what BioSmart is and how we're even attempting to get to that. And so I understand that there are two programs in the school. I understand that there are things in there that we do not like and would like to change, but we cannot be putting this on a school community when it is our job to do this work.
I'm sorry it sounds this way to you, Director Zuki. Um, Chief Collins will tell you that there was a proposal once to merge both programs because this program started as an immersion program 11 years ago. Just when the proposal to merge was going to take place, there was a switch in terms of the superintendent had to leave, and so the work was left hanging. Now, I want to be very mindful of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. We have been able to work with the Hmong Immersion program, and we've been able to align. The same effort and time have been put in the Spanish Immersion program. For some reason, it has not been able to be aligned as we would like it to be. So the purpose of this is not to close one school because it's not doing what it was created to do. The purpose of this recommendation was to merge these buildings together that would allow for the work that is going to be happening at the Hmong Immersion Program, the French Immersion Program, and a couple of other immersion programs. So I'm not here to throw the principal under the bus. I'm just here to say there was a time where the leader of this district realized and was going to create a merger, but it didn't happen because of circumstances beyond everybody's control.
Okay, and my point being that if we are, this is the point we're at right now. And right now the school is on the list. And there is, a modified version here. And my point is, if this is probably a larger conversation for each one of our schools, is program assessment. What schools do we have that, I mean, if you're using Jiming and the Mandarin immersion and you're talking about the Hmong dual language, and I'm like, okay, and I understand that we're we have models that we're basing off what we believe is successful, what we believe, still is a challenge, and what we're going to do going forward. And I think that that probably needs to be a part of this conversation too, as we're talking about Envision and what is, as we talk about well-rounded, which I am really tired of saying because I feel like we say that, but even in the saying it, I'm still not even sure we're getting anywhere close to what we're trying to say we want to do. But I understand what I think we want to do. I do also understand that we're not any closer to the achievement of that. And so, anyway, my point being that programs and how we want them aligned is not just on a school staff. That is on us as a district. And if we go year after year after year after year and saying we're trying to change this and not documenting the how or the why or the when and the who and when was community a part of this conversation, I don't really think we can just say for 11 years this has just not been working. And if it hasn't really been working, then again, that's on us. That's not on a school community, and it's not put this school on a list to close. It's, is it possible to reset? Is it possible, as you said, research-based, right, to do the things that we want to do? And if even after all of those things happen, we're still back at this place, then that's a different conversation. But I've not heard of, I've not heard about how we've tried to align this program. I, I think that that is just, this is the first time. I know that there has been, these are separate programs and they're all doing a little bit of something different, but I don't know what the academic alignment is that you're talking about.
Thank you, Dr. Obama. Thank you. Board members, I'd like to ask at this time, Wellstone is not on the list, correct? For tomorrow night's hearing? Wellstone's removed from the list, correct? Okay, again, I think process-wise, I just feel like we're getting into conversations that are definitely necessary. No doubt about it. I can't disagree with anything that was said. But again, this week, in less than 24 hours, we'll have a room full here. And I just want the community to understand what is at stake with potential vote on Wednesday night.
Superintendent, Chief Turner and Dr. Obama were talking about some of the programs that would be impacted. I think that's where the conversation was at. And so I was just talking, it went to programs, but they were talking about the impact of some of the decisions on other programs. So
Yeah,
I just want to be clear about that.
No, you are, and Director Carrillo brought it up as well. I mean, the Wellstone piece was very much many of them were tied to that, and we knew that going into it. But and we're going to need to talk about this, and it isn't just BioSmart. And I know the folks at Wellstone are, feel like they're being isolated, and I mean, there are a lot of programs in our district that right now either we don't know if they're effective, or we know that they're not effective and haven't provided the right support. So that is our work. That's our ongoing work. And it's much bigger than the schools we're talking about here as well. And I want to be forthright with that as well.
Through the chair and board members, initially that you're right. You started with knowing the rationale for why the board would help us be able to help look at the impacts. And so I started with Wilson just as an example, but the rationale to keep Wellstone open, if you could provide help, was it to have a school on the north end? Was it to give people more time to have the discussion? That would kind of then help us would be able to get your data together and know the impacts.
I think it's multiple factors. The first factor is Wellstone is one of 4 or 5 schools. It's over 500 kids in K to 5, and if you close that, that's one less school that's over 500. There's not going to be another over 500 school that gets created in the next 3 to 4 years through the envisioning process. So from a budgetary perspective, it's a little bit of like let's kick that rock that's really big and try to move it with our toes. it hurts and it's not productive. Now, if you were going to tell me that you could guarantee that there was going to be a 700 school, or I don't know, that the enrollment was going to automatically increase, then that would be slightly different. But there is no guarantee of that. And in fact, what we've seen in previous examples of this happening is that the net effect is a decrease, especially when you're talking about magnets. The second one is the North End needs access to well-rounded education, specifically dual language programs. We've seen it. We've seen we've talked about the data multiple ways. We've heard the families talk about the fact that they access this school specifically for its location. We think that if a future plan were to have something centrally located, you would probably have a better reception. The way that this was rolled out was not well received because it essentially moved the program from one side of the city to the other, and it's not an easily accessible side of the city, unfortunately, and it's not a fault of the neighborhood of Riverview. We actually think that Riverview should have access to quality schools. That is, nobody is saying that they shouldn't, but the reality is that it's not an accessible side of the city. And finally, I think the third main reason is school culture. We know that it's a good school culture. We've seen it. We know that it's had issues. So it's not a school that doesn't have issues. No, and don't get me wrong, no school is perfect. But what Wilson has been able to go through and actually thrive in the midst of that is something that should be looked at and understood rather than looked at as like a chess piece and moved around. And I think that's the key component that maybe Director Ellis was alluding to is what are we looking to in schools beyond just a programmatic moniker or a something that we can market that actually is attracting families and bringing them in, that provides a strong culture. So we respect the administration's thought process to align. We strongly believe that alignment hasn't happened in Spanish dual language, which is actually the largest dual language program in the district. And it hasn't happened for a myriad of reasons, but there has been no intentionality to make it happen prior to this decision. And so those are the main factors. How that process moves with Montessori, kind of like a chain effect. I think there's a little bit of that. We've heard from families. They felt very surprised. But still, we respect the decision to think about Montessori as a program that you're willing to merge and look at. We just think that this hyper-connected process is detrimental to getting to the end result.
Through the chair, Director, can you say a little bit more about hyper-connected?
Yeah. So hyper-dependent. The fact that when we originally heard the plan and we said, is there a plan B? We kept being insisted that this was a package deal, that no single piece could be pulled out, from the schools that were being closed or merged. And so at that point, we understood this to be hyper-connected or hyper-dependent in the sense that no conversation could be had on the differences between each one of these sites and the needs that they had, because the needs are very different. Some of the needs are programmatic. Some of the schools' needs are strongly related to enrollment. Some of the needs are very connected to the community and the neighborhood. And no two school is alike, but we're treating them all alike.
I wanted to weigh in here because I know I'm in the minority on this board, that I was, when we were kind of talking through these adjusted recommendations, I struggled with the Wellstone one. I understand what my colleagues have been saying, and I think they've made some really good arguments. I think the community has been really direct and enthusiastic in their support, and I've taken to heart what I've learned. And so this was a hard one for me. And as I was thinking about what our responsibility is, when I think about, I was talking before about like a legacy that we leave. And I want us to have positive school cultures. I think that matters. I think if your school culture isn't good, it's hard to learn. I also believe the responsibility of schools is to provide instructional and curricular excellence. And so I have to ask myself, if I was building a school district on my own by myself, which I never want to do, but if I was, would I build any specialty program? Doesn't have to be dual language. Would I build it on 2 sites? Do I think for professional development? Do I think for collaboration? Do I think for best practices that that's going to get us to that curricular and instructional excellence? I wouldn't. And I'm not an expert in this area. That's just kind of intuitive. And being familiar with the Mandarin program, that program is practically at the airport. It's so far south and west in our district. And because of its curricular and instructional excellence and its fine leadership, it draws people. And so I think it's like we can think about enrollment and we can think about this in different ways. And I respect that we can approach this in different ways. We can, let's just take the Mandarin program since we're talking about it. If we split that into 2 parts of the city, do we think it would be as strong as it is? Probably not. And when I think about what we are trying to create, what we're trying to build, like we don't get to start all the way over here. We are trying to live with the legacy we have been left, and we're trying to build the strongest possible programs we can. And I understand how hard it is to look at a program that is well enrolled, that is well loved, that as I walked through those halls, I saw happy people there. I also saw happy people at Riverview, and I saw happy people at Obama and J.J. Hill. This isn't about some schools being bad and some schools being good. It really isn't. This gets to what Director Ellis mentioned before. It's like our alignment has been off. When we talk about 11 years of work, why didn't we do something? In some ways, the thing we are trying to do now is the thing. It's to say that we need to concentrate our investment in places so we can do a really good job in those places. That we have struggled to do a really good job in those places. Not because our kids don't deserve it, but we're spread too thin. Our investment and our energy and our time is spread too thin. And we can't be as good everywhere as our kids need us to be. And so I struggled with this one because I saw the chain reaction. And I do agree that the framing of Wellstone was always a little problematic. It didn't quite fit the same way some of our other smaller schools, where the well-rounded, I think, logically made sense. And so I understood the skepticism coming from the Wellstone community when they were saying this doesn't fit us. I think that was something, if we went in a time machine, we might approach that differently. We might have that conversation in a different way. And so what I'm looking at right now is when I think about like what my preference would be, my rationale, I'll say working backwards for Highwood Hills, I think geographically they are isolated. And having been in that school last week, having an opportunity to tour with the principal and seeing the loving staff, just want to shout out, I don't know if he's watching, but there is an EA in that school who was dealing with a young person who was having a really hard time right when I walked in the building. Kid was shouting and yelling, and this guy just stood there lovingly, warmly, and allowed that kid the space to get through. And then I saw that same adult and that same kid throughout our tour. That's a place that they have a strong parent organization that meets regularly. Where their struggles are in the apartments that surround the building. And these are the nuances you get when you go into the buildings and you talk to people, is that families aren't staying there. It's partially that they're choosing other places, but it's partially that these apartments aren't 3 to 5 to 7 to 10-year homes, that people are moving to different places. And so that, that's going to require some partnership from the city and maybe working with neighborhood organizations, like figuring out like what that is. And also if families decide to, just go elsewhere, they do. There's some things we can't solve through programming as much as we want to. However, I'm excited about the possibility of working with that community and those families to see what is possible. And so that for me was an important rationale for, I think it is worth the work, and because it doesn't have other tails attached to it, it felt like something we could do, and that there's strong investment, I know, from district councils and community partners and some local elected officials on that side of town, and like let's convene people and let's really get to work on that. LEAP is a school in my community where I live. It always felt somewhat ill-fitting just because it's a high school, because it's an ALC. Its enrollment standards and things are different. And what I've learned through all the many presentations we've had and visiting again with the school community is that there's some real concern about like the level 1 students who come to school with no language, with an inability to communicate. And the love that those staff have for those students, they want to know that they're going to be okay where they go. I think there's some time and an opportunity here to think about how we capture that LEAP magic and innovate for the future. That maybe it doesn't look like a standalone building in the future. Maybe it's co-located. Maybe it looks like something else. But I think this conversation has sparked some ideas of things that could happen there that could benefit the entire district. And our students in our comprehensive high schools could benefit from the work that happens. And so I'm excited about seeing that. And I think there's some real, again, committed partners there. And just to conclude, the Wellstone recommendation, I struggle with it. I would have been satisfied with it remaining. I understand that my colleagues had different points of view on that, and I respect that. When you're one of 7, you make your case and you share your views, and sometimes it goes the way it goes. But I struggled with the Wellstone one primarily because of my desire for us to have educational excellence everywhere. And I don't know that we are getting that, and then the tails that cascade down into our other schools. I'm trying to figure out, how do we tell those schools to wait a little longer? I struggle with that. I really do. And again, having been in that place, I know the work ahead of them is hard. And we can say we're going to be there, and I expect that we all would be in some capacity, but it's going to fall to them. The district can provide all kinds of logistical support, but it is going to fall to them to do that work. And so if we are comfortable with that, if we are okay with that, then, we might proceed with something that for myself feels not exactly as I want, but that's how life goes. But I would say that I'm interested to hear from my colleagues about their rationales, and I appreciate this conversation with administration. I know we have been around the horn on this a while, and that it feels it's so difficult. These conversations are so hard. But this is good because I want the legacy we leave with this decision to be the best possible one we can get. And I can't speak for my colleagues, but I believe their intention is the same. And so I look forward to getting there together.
Roger, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to return to what Superintendent Gothard was talking about a little earlier, and that is the urgency involved with this decision that we're going to have to make very soon. Administration brought forward to us an Envision SPPS recommendation, which was very comprehensive and, as has been pointed out in numerous times, very much the individual elements were very much intertwined and dependent upon one another. And I think we all understood right away the difficulty in trying to make a vote or decide on something like that. Administration continued for the last several weeks to encourage us to keep the thought in mind that we must vote on the entire proposal. And I understand a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight about enrollment and well-rounded education, financial woes are all part of why we were looking for a comprehensive plan that was going to help us with some of those things. During the last several weeks, I know for a fact that everyone on this board has been very diligent and very conscientious and has made, each individual board members have made contacts out into the community to get feedback and comments from the folks who are ultimately going to be the most affected. So now we come to tonight, and I mean, I could go on and talk about the various reasons why I've been apprehensive about the recommendation that administration brought forward, but I think most of you have heard most of my thoughts on this already. So I'll simply come back around the barn and back to what I said when I began to talk a few seconds ago. And that is that I think Dr. Gothard is absolutely correct in that we have to make a decision in terms of how we're going to handle the process within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, 74 hours, or 24 months. Because the modified proposal that was brought forward tonight absolutely drastically changes the SPPS Envision recommendation that was brought to us a few weeks back. There's absolutely no question in my mind that the paper I have in front of me, modified Envision proposal, is actually a statement of disagreement with many of the elements in Envision SPPS. And so consequently, and now this, I usually come to a point whenever I talk like this and I start rambling, I usually come to a point where I turn back toward the superintendent and ask him to talk to us about what we can do about the fact that we have an impasse right now. We have administration that has brought forth SPPS Envision SPPS, and has put an awful lot of work into it and are very confident and somewhat proud of their work. But we have a 7-member board which just brought forth a modified proposal. And that modified proposal, let's not make any bones about it, this modified proposal contradicts quite a bit of the elements of the original recommendation that was brought to us. So therefore, we're not just at an impasse, we are at a situation where we have to make a decision, as Chief Turner correctly said, that is going to impact every kid in this district and every family in this district. And some of you are thinking, is he finally going to stop talking? Yes, I am. Because I'm going to ask Superintendent Gothard to try and respond to what he thinks he heard me say. Thank you, Superintendent Gothard.
You bet. Through the chair, I was looking to my team to maybe bail me out. No, honestly, I can't disagree with anything you said. And truthfully, based on, we spent as much time together in the last 2.5, 3 months than in a long time. So I don't know that it's any real surprise in terms of what you've ultimately come to as a board in terms of this modification. But I want to be real clear, and the team will remember me saying this. Regardless of the vote, we wake up the next day and we envision for this district. I mean, we have to. I mean, we do. There's a lot of work to be done. So I think what I'm hearing tonight is some emotion that's been bottled up by you that you're finally getting. You feel like, we've come to this point, and now you can truly share what you've experienced as an individual and as a board as a whole. These last few weeks and couple months. But you're going to get, really thoughtful work from us as we move forward, as it pertains to everything to strengthen, education in the district. And it's challenging. And I hate to, make comparisons. The team gets so sick of my analogies, but what we try to do is to reduce the amount of area we have to cover in our district with declining resources. And we're at a point where, we try to push the resources to every edge of that geometrical shape, figuratively, of course. And by cutting off some of that geometric shape, we can get our resources to the edge. But without excising some of that, some of our area, we're going to have a really tough time getting the resources out to every nook and cranny of the district. That, by the way, deserves it. Let's not forget that. That none of the choices that we make around resources that are going to have an impact on children, on staff, on families, feels good in any way, shape, or form. So we're not going to get quite the reset that Envision SPPS was recommending, but that doesn't mean that our efforts, and most certainly Chief Turner and the team that worked with her and the work groups, that's still really important work, all of it. And what I need most from the board tonight is that we need to make sure that we have a properly posted public hearing for tomorrow evening. And I just want to be very clear with that so that we don't find ourselves Wednesday night saying, well, we should have done that Monday or Tuesday night. So that is one outcome that I feel we need for sure. The other thing is, board members, are there additional questions from administration that you want us to prepare for? As you heard Chief Turner say earlier, to need some time to analyze the modified recommendation that you've brought forward tonight to make sure that we can give you thoughtful analysis on Wednesday night before you vote. We want to make sure that you know, without judgment, the ramifications of the choices. Our job is not to tell you you're right or wrong for this reason. Our job is to present to you information that helps you make the most informed decision based on your particular beliefs about any recommendation. So I mean that when I say that. We just want to bring back thoughtful analysis of pros and cons versus any of the modifications to the recommendation, just so you know full out, what our work is going to entail moving forward. So Director Broderick, I hope that helps you a little bit, but that's how I would frame where things are at.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Gothard. And my only additional comment would be, if I may take this personal privilege, and that is, I sort of fancy myself as the senior member of the board, but I certainly am. But I would like very much, because I think your response to what I just asked you, Superintendent Gothard, was what I enjoy hearing so much from a superintendent, and that's from the mind and from the heart, and that's the response that I got. I would like to make sure that other people on the board, if they have any other closing remarks, particularly our leadership with our chair and our vice chair, if they would like to talk a little bit about what their expectations will be for the next, what did I say, 48 hours. So Vice Chair Vu or Chair Foster, if you'd like to talk a little bit in terms of what you think the board should be thinking about tonight.
I want to like to start with saying, we know everybody's working really hard at this. Just like our teachers and EAs and professionals and buildings are stressed and pulled thin and tight, we know that you all are as well. I'll let the board know that I asked leadership last week a very direct question. a very direct question, and it just basically was, if we make some changes, this vote's not going to pass this board. Will the ego of the board and the ego of leadership collide on that, or can we make something happen for our kids and families? And the response that I got, I trusted that response back, that this isn't about this plan, and that it can happen. I do acknowledge that we are dumping something in the last wee minutes and expecting quick turnaround. But that's real. You guys understand this board and kind of how we roll. And we don't do that to add any hardships to you. That this is really a huge decision to make. Even within what's happened here, and for community to see this, there are lots of conversations behind the bin to get to this, to get to something, to get some work moving. Um, we're not all in agreement. We're not all in alignment. And it's really about what can we align on as 7 individuals. And to note that the decision is on this board. So when we talk about Director Kopp, the future, sustainability, long-term outcomes, what we decide on our action or inaction will be determining some things here. Dr. Gothard, we are charging you and the team to make that happen and to work with community and in buildings and families and kids to idealize what that could look like and be envisioned to be to support our communities. And so I say that because we are 2 days away from what's supposed to be a vote. And as you can see, we are going to roll right into it to the very last moment, getting information. And so as a board member, again, now knowing what we've said we can align on to vote on at this time, very clear and specific directions. I'd also, I'm thinking about if we're subsidizing, if we're not, what are the current enrollment trends, theory of alignment as, I was about to say her name, Director, Dr. Abum has said is, thinking specifically about restructure, realign, redesign. That's what we're trying to do. This board, his question is, does that have to happen in one WAP? One of the other questions was around, can we phase in? But the concern, even from you all doing this work, and what we've seen from our community is, I'll live in stress the next year, trying to figure out and wonder what. Enrollment will not be able to give direction to families. So thinking there's a chain reaction, but here's the deal. One way or another, we're all going to be living in this together, no matter what we decide. And I personally would prefer to say, if we're not doing this now, it's the responsibility of me as a board member to every year be looking at this, because what we've seen in trends and data is the continuing to rob one school for another school. And I really do not want to be a part of that, just to be honest with you all, because it is setting us up. It's setting our kids up. It's setting our staff up who are juggling between buildings. It just really is. But we do, with this plan, have option and opportunities to re-envision with some time in there, evaluate, and then be able to realistically say what worked, what didn't, what tried. But we have some historical data that we really have to sit in on. And so that, when you think about these 7 members and the decisions of weighing in data, weighing in the emotions and feelings of the communities in these buildings, it makes it really hard. But I know what my role is. And so I would love to hear from you all tomorrow. some very clear, concise stuff about this current plan, about where you see some strengths. I ask you all to be creative and think outside the box about some things, just like we do in other areas, and bring that back to us.
Thank you for that.
I have a request too around the data. If you can give us the 5-year projection now that this is implemented, not the whole big. So before you gave us a 5-year projection, if we did nothing, a 5-year projection for what this would look like.
Through the chair, we can certainly add that as one of our data points. I also just want to say I don't believe Director Roger, we're at an impasse, and I appreciate Chair Foster's comment because this is give and take. We've learned some things. The board has learned some things. The community has learned some things. We all do agree things can't remain the same. So I don't think we are at an impasse. That was part of the reason for wanting to hear the rationale, just so we could take that into account and maybe consider some modifications to the board's modifications that adjust your rationale and stayed within your desired outcome of it. So we've heard it about, Wellstone. So we can work that in and know that those were the priority reasons of keeping Wellstone open. Was there a rationale for Obama that could be shared so that we would know kind of some direction around that? And I believe also Chief Collins just wanted to. Okay. Is there for Obama?
Anybody want to share rationale for Obama? The only rationale, I just want to reiterate the rationale we had in that this was an interconnected piece with Wellstone, and that we've heard over and over again to not pull these pieces apart. So, as it stands right now, we just want to leave Obama as it is. We don't want to add anything new to it. Does that make sense, Chief Turner?
Through the chair, no. So if we don't add anything to it, it would mean that Obama would close, but you're saying it.
No, we don't. Obama was never gonna. Was Obama gonna close anyway? Is that what I'm hearing? Because this is how I understood it. I understood that if Wellstone doesn't happen, then all the schools attached to Wellstone doesn't happen either. That's how I understood it.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Vu. So the recommendation or the comment was, if Wellstone doesn't happen, it has an impact to Riverview Dual, Riverview Community, Cherokee, Montessori, to J.J. Hill Montessori, and then to Obama. It has an impact. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. It has an impact. And so I think if the board were to hear the impacts by keeping open LEAP, keeping open Highwood Hills, keeping open Wellstone, both dual and Wells BioSmart, I think if you were to hear the impacts to those other programs, it might help you make a modification to your modification that still addresses the overall reason and rationale for Envision, was to align program with facilities. So that was the ultimate goal of Envision, and we were doing it through well-rounded education. Although, to get to Dr. Gothard's point, and what we'll share some about tomorrow, is that we still have to understand and realize that as a system, we need to physically close some schools. Because what will continue to happen is that, and this is just a very simple example, if we have 100 kindergartners come into the district, we'll have significantly more than that, but I'm just using an example for simple math. If we have 100 kindergartners next year that comes into this district, every single remaining school that's open has to have kids in them in order for it to have a school. So we will need to spread those children around to all of the remaining schools. That gets to very small and unsustainable programming. So by still closing some of the programs, it helps so that you're spreading or allocating the smaller number of incoming students to a fewer number of schools so that we can have something to offer and promote to families. Because with an enrollment campaign, which we're all looking forward to as administration, we're looking forward to working with the community, looking forward to working with SPFE on it. But with all due respect, we have to have something to promote and to sell. And we will not have that with small, tiny, unsustainable schools because they won't have anything. We'll be competing against the schools that have. And so I think if we can could make some modifications to the modifications that would take that into into account of it if you were to take out the schools and think of them as separate with Wellstone, Highwood Hills, and LEAP as a particular program. I would urge the board to give the administration an opportunity to put something together so that for instance, with Wellstone remaining open, that we have an impact directly to Wellstone, but we don't have a negative impact that would impact five other programs. As Director Kopp said, I would like to have an opportunity to put together a plan that gives a chance for those 5 other programs to provide a well-rounded program or to provide a equitable program, to provide a program that is of interest and that is families that would be willing to interested to enroll in. Without that, my fear is that we have forced Riverview to not be able to promote or sell much of anything. We have forced Cherokee to do the same thing. We have forced Obama to do the same thing. And it is, and Director Kopp is right. She has participated in it and been a part of it, and it's very difficult for a school to be able to do that. So I think we could get something together for tomorrow, for sure by Wednesday. And my assumption is then General Counsel Long and Chair that we would present tomorrow all of the schools that have been discussed as closing so that we would hear public comment on more than less to meet the legal parameters. Is that correct?
Is that allowable
Chair Foster, members of the board, Superintendent Gothard, Chief Turner. Yeah, in response to that question, so we've noticed the public meeting, we've noticed the buildings that have been proposed for closure. We are giving the public the opportunity to provide testimony with respect to that. So that would be my recommendation, that we proceed in that manner with the list that we have given published notice of. Obviously, when the time comes on Wednesday, in light of all that comment and everything like that, the board will then be voting. But for purposes of the public hearing tomorrow, we want to make sure that we have everything on the table as we have noticed it.
Dr. Cobb.
Just a couple, that was one of my questions was, I think if we're talking about modifications to the modifications, having the broadest possible kind of definition as we're thinking about tomorrow, so we're not limited into what we might discover in the next 24 hours or less. But 2 things I'm interested in terms of impact of these adjustments would be, I know last week the superintendent spoke about a recruitment and retention plan. And so understanding the impact of a modification on, and then we didn't get into a lot of detail, but anything we can learn about how that might be impacted. And I don't know if the progress monitoring and milestones is impacted at all, but I think that's been, for me, has been an important part of like the board being accountable to the public and kind of keeping this conversation going. And if there's any adjustment to that, I'd be interested to hear that as well.
Dr. Ellis?
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things in the modification, point 1, 2, and 3. There are parts of this that with the modification that I agree with. There are parts of it I'm trying to figure out specifically what 1, 2, and 3 looks like. And as we're talking about going forward and 12 to 18 months, and like there are some specifics in here, and I'm wondering how we see that as a board getting done and or accomplished. The district will host monthly meetings, where, how, who, like that's a very specific thing to ask for. And then like what else would need to happen as part of this discussion for the future of programming. And then just Cherokee Heights will be supported to begin a West Side specific recruitment and engagement plan. That's very specific for one school and a list of some schools. So I'm confused by that. That's just one thing for one school. And then during the next 12 to 18 months, Obama families will have the opportunity to learn about the Montessori model. That again is very specific too. And then a committee will be formed. So I'm trying to understand some of these points in the modification and how we imagine as a board these things will happen. And how administration and when in the timeline for these things happening and next steps in real time. Because this was a lot, and setting this stuff up and making sure that families can attend and engage, and what are we actually asking them to do? This is a lot. And then, not that I don't think that we're capable of doing it, but I just feel like there just needs to be a little bit, there needs to be some clarity around what we are asking for as a board when it comes to what we want the district, what we're going to do as a district to support families and whatever comes next. And I guess thinking about what are we doing over the next 12 to 18 months specifically? Because maybe Obama families don't want to spend the next 12 to 18 months learning about Montessori. So what does that mean?
So I think when we talk about that particular point, it's about the original proposal was basically dislocating the community school to move in a Montessori program. And we asked, would the community program still be able to reside in Obama? And they said yes. But the question is, would those students be able to flow right into a Montessori program after they've been in a regular classroom? And so I think the 12 to 18 months was giving the Obama families opportunity to learn what Montessori is, learn, be able to expose their students to that theory of education, so that they have a different understanding or a better understanding if the merger does end up happening in the future of what's happening, so that they're not being dislocated out of the building, but they're saying, oh, J.J. Hill is coming, I'll just join in with that crew. Because I think the biggest problem was we were trying to move folks out, to move other people in. And that just didn't seem ethical for me as a board member. It just didn't seem ethical. And then with the committee being formed to begin to envision the future 6 to 8 program at Obama, I think there's a vision from the administration of what that looks like, but is there buy-in? And when we think about how many middle schools are in that area, I did kind of talk to some middle school principals who said they're not concerned about their enrollment with this, but I am concerned about enrollment in that area. And so I just want to make sure that if we're going to build another middle school program in that area, that it's going to be something that's solid and strong and that there's buy-in in the process, not just opening up the doors and then, folks are like, I'm still sending my kid over here where my son went before, and we're not getting the enrollment increase that we intended. And so when I look at point 3, that's kind of what I'm feeling in there and what I'm thinking needs to be done in order for there to be a clear merger process in that building, to just dislocate folks and move another group in, or even just renovate the building and then move another group in. It just didn't seem ethical. We could do the whole big process, but let's make it a process. And then we can get to the outcome of what we're trying to do, but let's make it a process that's ethical to the community, to the folks that are working in those buildings, and the people that will that are going to use the buildings in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Director Allen. Um, you sparked something. Again, like I said, the number one and number 2. Because I heard we're really excited. Chief Turner mentioned enrollment plan for the district and marketing and all of that. But I mean, this right now is very specific to Cherokee Heights, and I'm not entirely sure how we got to that. Can somebody explain that to me?
I think it was just as a direct reflection of what was happening because Wellstone wasn't happening. It wasn't that other schools weren't going to have it. It was just kind of to make specific because Cherokee is still going to be a small school. And in order for them to have the kind of offerings we say we want schools to have, they were going to need something very specific. And if we didn't proceed with the Wellstone recommendation, they weren't going to have Riverview merge with their community, and not that it would be 100%, but that would kind of give them a boost. They weren't going to have that boost, and so something different was required there. But yeah, that's a good point. It wasn't to say that other people weren't getting it. It was just really to name the specific implications of removing the Wellstone recommendation, just sort of because I'm just thinking about those communities who are downstream of that wanting to know what happens now to me. Other communities have had more time to kind of, whether they like the recommendations or not, at least kind of know what to expect. And I think some schools have been on this other journey, and just to give them a little bit of a glimpse of a future was how I was interpreting it.
Superintendent Gothard.
Chair and members of the board, if I could just, again, you've heard me say this a number of times tonight now. We have a legal obligation to meet this week if you are indeed going to vote or consider a recommendation on Wednesday night. A lot of this discussion is really strategic in terms of how we want to move forward, and it's wonderful. I think it is going to have its right place and time. Far more than here at the dais. We're going to have to schedule some work sessions and, in fact, bring some of the folks that Chief Turner worked with in. And it's very much like a lot of the conversations that were had to get to the recommendation that was before you. So again, I just ask with the time that we have, is it your desire to consider a vote for action Wednesday evening? As it stands tonight. Tomorrow night you could hear a whole bunch of different things, but are we still on track for that for this week? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we have the list. We have the list of schools. We went through that. Chief Turner went through that. Tomorrow evening, Chief Turner will give a brief presentation of the schools that are going to be listed for closure. And then when the board feels ready, we'll start the public hearing. Wednesday evening, as I understand it, there will be some time for a presentation of sorts before we list the recommendation and solicit in additional feedback, discussion from you all before you feel ready to call to question the recommendation.
All right, thank you. Director Broderick?
I have a procedural question, I think that relates to what Superintendent Gothard was just saying. And my question would be either to General Counsel Long or Superintendent, or for that matter, Vice Chair Vu, because he brought forward the modified envision proposal. Should we be formally presenting this proposal to administration tonight so that we actually have a proposal on the table, a modified proposal on the table? And then we've gone on record as saying that we want to present this, not that we necessarily want to vote on this modified proposal, but that we want to vote on presenting it to administration so that when we come into this meeting on Wednesday night, we are much more clear in terms of what we've been talking about tonight. Did you follow that, General Counsel Long?
Through the chair, Director Broderick, I'm still processing your question.
Maybe if I could just try to clarify it a little bit, and maybe someone else can help me, or maybe I should just turn to Vice Chair Vu. But we brought, Vice Chair Vu began this portion of this meeting with reading the modified envision proposal. And as I said, this modified envision proposal certainly contradicts a lot of what was contained in the original recommendation. So therefore, I'm wondering whether we should more formally present this proposal rather than just something that Vice Chair Vu read at the beginning of the meeting that all of us heard, and then we're going to talk about it or think about it between now and Wednesday. I think we have to have something of substance on the table in order to talk about whether we're modifying or not modifying, or whether we're approving the proposal, or what's going to happen. That's it. Now, are you understanding what you may not understand my question, but I think you understand what my worries are.
Through the chair, Director Broderick, yeah, thank you for that. It would be my recommendation that this is something that would be come up on Wednesday night. That would be the time, because right now there's proposals, but there's been no motion. There's really nothing on the table for the board. And the purpose of the meeting on Wednesday is for then the board to make a decision via motion and amendments to motions or whatever, however that plays out. Because we don't, we can't really, we cannot have a vote on whether or not to close the school prior to having the public hearing. That's the purpose of tomorrow night, is to have that public hearing first, have testimony pro and con from the public, and then after that, the meeting that in this case we have scheduled for Wednesday is then when a motion would be made for board action, second on that, discussion on that, amendments to that. All of that would be appropriate for Wednesday night's meeting.
So my question then I guess boils down to is, has this been entered into the record tonight? This modified envision proposal, has it been entered into the record tonight for discussion? I don't think it could have without some type of motion.
I just want to respond to Director Broderick. The purpose of tonight's meeting was to discuss with the administration the ramifications, some of it, of this proposal. We haven't discussed all of it. Administration will come back. They need to sit on this for a little bit longer. They will come back with some alternate proposals to the modification. From what I hear, Superintendent Gothard has recommended as such, but for us as a board action, like not director, but General Counsel Long has mentioned, we have to make a motion. We have to make a motion to make it official the way that you're talking about.
So then,
On Wednesday, not today, but on
okay,
Wednesday.
Vice Chair Vu, then you are satisfied with the fact that, and I know you were helping to get board members to give you the type of input so that we came up with this modified envision proposal. And you are satisfied with the fact that tonight it was adequately brought up to the board and to the administration for follow-up.
Yes, I'm satisfied up to this point.
Thank you.
Through the
Chief
chair.
Avery, go ahead.
Thanks through the vice chair, Vice Chair Vu and Director Broderick. If there's a concern, what we can do is post the modified document online so everyone can see it. So that's one way that we could do that. I can talk, Chief Turner said we can do that. So that's number one. And I think the other thing too is ultimately whatever the board wants us to put in the recommendation as a motion to be agreed upon, that is what we will do.
And Chief Baker, through the chair, one thing to add, Director Broderick, the purpose, what I take as the purpose of tonight is that you gave very clear direction to administration. And that's what we wanted tonight, and you definitely gave us that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Any other questions or comments? Anything for legal? Questions or comments? All right. As a reminder, there is a public hearing tomorrow, Tuesday, November 30th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. Also, there's a special Envision SPPS meeting on Wednesday, December 1st, 2021 at 6:05 p.m. Our next committee of the board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 4:30 p.m. And our next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, December 14th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with public comment. With that, I would motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
This time, I'm going to say Broderick was the loudest.
Director Foster,
Yes.
Director Broderick,
Yes.
Director Allen,
Yes.
Director Cobb,
Yes.
Director Carrillo,
Yes.
Director Ellis is yes, Director Vu.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. The time is now 8:23 p.m. and we are adjourned.